I think I'm a person who tends to have a lot of hot takes when it comes to photography and cinematography. This might be my number one hot take. In my opinion, sharpness does not matter when it comes to your filmmaking or your photography. Yeah, I know that's kind of a crazy hot take. A lot of people, myself included, so much in my career, especially when it comes to, professional commercial work and that type of thing, maybe that's an exception. But if you look back at old movies that were shot in film and that were maybe scanned in really low resolution, I think back to like the original Star Wars films that my dad used to have on VHS. And I would pop those suckers in and they'd be in like 240 or 360p, and they were scanned poorly, and they're basically blurry. Maybe they weren't shot to be blurry, but you're watching a blurry little 3x4 thing on a tube TV, and it didn't matter. I mean, maybe that was because I was a kid, and maybe it's for some type of nostalgia for old movies like that. But then I started thinking, we don't look at paintings and go, this painting isn't sharp enough, or this painting doesn't have enough detail, or I can't make out the eyelashes on this character's face in this painting. We don't do that. It's just not a thing we talk about. It's not a thing we care about. And some of my favorite photos from other photographers and cinematographers are ones that are more painterly. And we talk about what makes a cinematic image, and so often we refer to this idea of a painterly image. For instance, one of the cinematographers I think of is Hoyte van Hoytema. I look at a movie like Interstellar that had some shots that were just completely out of focus. A lot of the time this happens with 70mm film. Because it's such a large format sensor, it's a lot harder to nail the focus when you're shooting in a relatively wide open aperture. Or I think of cinematographers like Bruno Delbonnel, who photographed Inside Llewyn Davis, and I think of how painterly and soft those images are. I think of Bruno's work in movies like Harry Potter 6, which had such a unique look compared to all the other Harry Potter films for how painterly it looked. Truly, I don't care about sharpness as a viewer when I'm watching a movie or looking at a photograph. And in fact, some of my favorite photographs are ones that have been accidentally out of focus or purposefully out of focus, or photos where I've used long shutter to create intentional motion blur. Sometimes with a more painterly, out of focus shot, it becomes more about the essence and the emotion and the feeling, and less about just having a perfectly technically executed image, if that makes sense. Sometimes I think when you have broad strokes, it helps you focus on the essence and the feeling and the emotions behind a piece of work instead of the things that don't actually matter. Art is supposed to evoke emotion, at least in my opinion. And so that's why maybe my caveat in the beginning talking about commercial work, that's not always meant to be just about the art or the emotion behind something, but you're trying to sell a product. You're trying to make a model look beautiful, or you're trying to make a product to look crisp and sharp. And so those are maybe some exceptions. But when I'm thinking about art, pure storytelling, I don't think it matters as much. I'm going to flash some work from some of my favorite photographers that I follow on Instagram as well, just real quickly here with their handles so you can go follow them. These are photographers that inspire me and influence my work. And a lot of these are photographers that are experimenting with long shutter speeds. And yeah, you tell me, are these bad photos because they're not in focus, or are they absolutely incredible, mind-bending works of art? I think it's the latter. I look at this photo that I took of this man passing by me in the street, and he was smoking, and he had kind of those that complexion of an old smoker who's been smoking his whole life. He had these wrinkles and these bags and this uneven complexion. And he was so in his own world, he didn't even notice me pointing the camera at him. I kind of did one of those where it's like kind of chest height camera pointed and click, which is, and I was shooting on a vintage lens that didn't have autofocus. So of course it was out of focus unintentionally, but I think it created a really interesting image out of this. And I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but that's what I think is interesting about art is, and specifically visual art, is you're not necessarily trying to put it in words, you're just trying to create a feeling. And I don't know, I feel something when I look at this image in a way that I'm not sure I would feel if it was in focus. I think another aspect to this is to talk about the other things besides focus that can create an interesting image. So maybe instead of focusing on focus, we should be focusing on the subject, the location. We should be focusing on creating interesting composition, interesting depth and contrast, something that creates a message and speaks to us. Everybody has a phone in their pocket these days. Everyone is a photographer. Everyone takes photos on their morning commute, walking down the street to go get a coffee, and they see the lighting is nice and they snap a quick photo. It's all point and shoot. There's no thought that goes into it. It's just let me show you what I'm seeing and just relay what I'm seeing. And it looked cool, and I got a photo of it. And even photographers who use real cameras, not just phones. I think a lot of photography is also just like that, especially, and this is another hot take, in the film photography world, it's kind of just seen as well, I'm shooting it on film and that's what makes it cool. And so I'm just going to show you what I saw in a very documentarian way. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But are you creating the most interesting images that actually makes me want to look at them? Not really, in my opinion. So anyways, that's a whole side tangent. But I think it's interesting to talk about this idea of sharpness, because then if we forget about whether something is in focus and we think about some of the other aspects that make a photo interesting, then maybe that's the good lesson and the good takeaway here is let's all start thinking about all the other things that make a photo interesting and actually trying to incorporate that in our day-to-day photos that we take. And perhaps if we're purposefully putting our photos out of focus, it helps us not think of focus as the main important part of a photo, but it helps us think about composition more and exposure more and color and all these other interesting things that we can start thinking about. But yeah, anyway, I don't think I have anything else to say about that. It's just kind of something I wanted to talk about today and share and get your opinions on what you guys think. Do you really love this kind of trend going on now with these kind of like blurry photos or slow shutter speed photos? What do you think about them? I've been doing a lot of this kind of photography for my book that will be coming out soon. So I've been really falling in love with this style and experimenting a lot more with it. And it speaks to me, at least, as an artist. And yeah, I'd love to know how you interpret it and if it speaks to you in the same way or in a different way. So let me know in the comments. Are there any other techniques, things that you have hot takes on? Do you really care about focus? And maybe I'm speaking a bunch of hoopla. Let me know in the comments as well. All right, that's me for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. Catch you later.